All right, here we go. We got Coach Alex, Coach Jim from the University of Arizona. We got a really cool event coming up here in April, the Iron Cats Strength and Conditioning Seminar, where they asked me to come in and speak. So I thought this would be a cool opportunity to kind of dive in and hit some areas that I don't think is talked about a whole lot about setting up a seminar and going through all the process from A to B and actually getting to that point and all the things you got to consider from sponsors and maybe clearing it through the athletic department on what can you use the weight room for the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this would be a cool platform to talk about just the challenges of setting up a seminar and what are the things that we've all kind of learned from that and kind of using this as an opportunity to talk about the seminar, but also to talk about how to set one up ourselves. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with you, Alex. Why don't you give a quick background on yourself and then we'll go to Coach Jim here next.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. My name is Alex Curro. This is my going into my second year here at U of A. Previously, I was at University of Central Florida for 4 years. I did internships at some other different places over each summer. So I was at Villanova, I was at Florida, University of Kansas, and then Arizona, which was kind of my link back over here. And then I did my grad assistantship at Florida State, and then now I'm going into like I said, my second year here at Arizona. And it's actually funny enough, the conference was the first place I actually met Jim. And so that kind of hooked me up with the internship. And then, years later now, I'm here as a full time guy. So,
Dude, and there we go, right? Enough reason to find some new hot talent out there. Coach Jim, why don't you hit yourself, go over yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Like I said, like Alex said, I'm happy to help and be here. Jim Krumpos, the Associate AD of Performance here at the University of Arizona. Been here off and on since the late 90s, but been back here um, in a consecutive time period since 2013. So I oversee, the entire strength staff and then have a couple teams that I work with individually. And yeah, I just really enjoy at this point in my career trying to better the field and trying to make coaches better and I think really try to help them navigate kind of like we talked about navigate the field of college strength and conditioning.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jim, why don't we go off of you started this a couple years ago, and when you were thinking about going about this, did you have experience at other universities where you've run seminars, or was this something that you wanted to give a shot at University of Arizona?
Yeah, it's a funny story. We initially this group kind of organically because we initially had this, and we could talk about this too. We initially wanted to get a strength and conditioning camp going. We saw all these different sports at the University of Arizona, making pretty good money, having camps. And we thought, man, there's just not a ton of. It's Tucson, Arizona, so it's a pretty big town. There's a million people, but it's not like some of these towns that have a ton of performance centers and that type of thing. So we thought, man, we could really do well with a strength and conditioning summer camp. And so as we were trying to navigate that and gain interest in that, we thought a great way to gain interest in that would be to have a seminar and have a coaching clinic where we just kind of really got out in front of the community, uh, local high school, middle school coaches, strength coaches, maybe even personal trainers or whatever, people working at CrossFit gyms and those type of things in the community to let them see our facilities, see what we were offering a little bit, guide them a little bit, give them something out of it. But really, we were trying to attract people, and we even opened it up to parents and whoever that first year. Like, just come check it out. We didn't pay, we didn't charge anything. We just were trying to get interest for our summer strength and conditioning camps. And that's how it began. Um, and that's that was like we talked like you talked about like that's where we started the learning process of like what does this look like, what does it look like to actually do the camp and also the clinic and starting through the whole process of putting it together. So that's really how it started.
What was so I'm assuming you guys didn't do the actual training camps. What was the big reason why you kind of did go in that direction, or am I wrong on that?
No, we ended up doing it. We ended up doing it for
Okay.
about we did the camps about 4 years, and it was really interesting because what we found ultimately was we really thought that this would be attractive to high school athletes, right? Like you're getting ready to go to college, come train at the same facility that these college athletes are training at, be under the supervision of people that are, have master's degrees and years of experience training high level athletes and those type of things. And we really ran into a couple problems. We ended up doing about 4 or 5 years, and we ended up making. I really wanted it to be a way to get some extra income for my staff. I never had grandeur ideas that this was going to be a huge moneymaker for myself. It was more to help supplement the income of the staff. We ran into a couple issues over time that we had to navigate, and first one was just the time. One of the things that most of the summer camps do is it's babysitting, right? You can go to the swim camp all day and it's 8 to 5. You go to the softball camp and it's 8 to 5. We didn't want to get into that. We didn't want to have to be around and we didn't have access to, we couldn't have the facility off limits for everybody else for 8 hours a day too. Like we still had our teams that were training here in the summer. So we had to navigate that point. So when you start saying, okay, you're just going to do 2 hours a day for your camp and you're going 5 days a week or 4 days a week, okay, it's easy to fill that time with strength conditioning, plyos, whatever, education, nutrition, that kind of stuff. But when do you do it that works well for the parents? So figuring out that time frame, and also when do you do it where you don't have your staff that in the summertime, that's our kind of time to not work 15-hour days. We can work normal kind of 6 to 8 hour days and not burn out your staff in the time of year that they get out of here earlier, not having them here till 9, 10 o'clock at night, So navigating parking. We are a major university. There's 50,000 students here. It's not like it's easy to navigate and get to the weight room, unfortunately. And then navigating, like I mentioned earlier, the high school kids are all training with their sport coaches are at their high school for the summertime for the most part. And so we kind of missed the ball the first 2 years, really trying to target them. We really found out that the majority of our campers were middle school kids, kids that were just getting into strength and conditioning. Parents saw the need and they knew there was a need for that, but also they didn't have and they wanted to do it and do it correctly and learn it correctly and not just get crushed. It's not hard to bury someone, like we all know, but to actually have a plan and to progress them and help them be a better athlete. And what we ran into a little bit also too that we're fighting was that the parents are already paying for baseball camp, for all these other camps, and there's only so much disposable income for your kids in camps. And ultimately, most of the parents are going to choose to send them to showcases or, their sport camps more than the strength and conditioning camp. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it was figuring out, well, what's the price point that we can do that we can get enough people, that we can provide value, but also not make it so inexpensive that it doesn't. There's a price point where this. If you go too cheap, then people are like, "Oh, that's not worth anything," right? So figuring out that price point. So when we started that was back in 2015, and as I was going through the internet trying to find other universities and other people that were doing summer strength and conditioning camps, it was interesting because everything I found was dated. There was nobody that was really currently doing it. And I imagine that most of the people in the college setting ran into these similar issues navigating. Yeah. So we did end up doing it, so the clinic really developed over the years from trying to get people to the camps to, all right, let's just do something. Let's not talk about the same old sets and reps. Not just put an Excel file up on a PowerPoint and go through sets and reps and progressions. Let's try to touch on things that maybe aren't being talked about at the national level. Let's try to keep it a more intimate environment. And let's just try to bring a lot of good strength coaches that we all are connected with into one place and develop something that not only is there a curriculum, but you're just learning a lot being around these people in an intimate environment for a couple of days. You always learn a lot at the national conferences too, just in between sessions, but there's just so many people, right? And you're just like, you're catching up half the time and you don't really get that kind of where it's slowed down and you can really dig in and do what we all want to do is talk shop.
Yeah. Alex, I got a good question for you. What number seminar at University of Arizona that you go to? Was it the third one, the second one? And then what was the reason behind that? Were you looking to kind of create a network, or did you just want to go and learn?
Yeah, so I believe, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was the third one potentially. It was 2019.
Yeah.
So that was the third one. The reason I went there was because my old boss at UCF was actually a coworker of Jim's when he was at Miami. So Jim had men's basketball, and then Alex, my boss, had women's basketball. And so through that connection, Alex was already going to go out there. And the previous year, I had gone to the national conference, and kind of like Jim said, like it was a great experience. I learned a lot, being in that giant environment of everybody in the field basically, and going into the seminars and so forth. But I kind of wanted to mix it up the following year, and I funnily enough was so the first time I met Jim was at the conference, but I had a phone call with him my freshman year of college because I was looking for that first internship where I ended up going to Villanova. I was going to initially potentially go to Arizona because like that same connection. But at that point, I mean, I was 18 years old. I didn't have a way to get my car out there. I didn't think it was really logistically feasible. So I always had Arizona in the back of my mind. And then Alex said that he was going out to the conference that year in 2019, and he let me know, and I wanted to go with him. So I ended up going to that conference as well as Kansas's, which was the place that I was going for my internship that following summer. Um, so I ended up going out there and meeting Jim and meeting all the other staff members and everybody else that came there. And kind of like Jim had said, it was really great because it does have that contrast of the national conference with so many people, and then you have that really intimate interaction with all the other coaches that are there, because it is a lot slower pace. So that was really great because then I got to meet Jim. I got to meet most of the staff that was there was the same staff that I ended up working for in the following spring, and it kind of broke the ice between Jim and I. And then when I was looking for my undergraduate internship in the spring, it was pretty seamless. Hey, could I come out and intern? And
Mhm.
there we are.
Sure, that's awesome. So, Jim, I kind of want to start from the beginning, right? So, I think you guys probably started working on this probably last fall. Walk me through now. This is fifth, sixth time you've done this. You start, okay, November hits, Alex, staff, let's start getting our like ducks in order here. Who do we want to speak? From A all the way to when we get to our seminar here in April, what the process is and how you're chipping away at this big overall project. Relatively speaking to your other full-time job, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, first of all, it starts with setting your dates, right? Like, when are we going to do this? And even right off the bat, we didn't want to compete with the national clinics,
Mhm.
and we didn't want to compete with summertime plans, because for most of us, it's like most of the attendees now, that's when they're getting out and doing stuff. Um, is that going to be a problem with the emails in the background there?
Nope, nope, I don't see a thing.
Okay.
You're doing great.
Um, so setting the dates. So then you kind of go like, well, now, especially, even whatever that was, 7, 8 years ago, now the Final Four start having a strength and conditioning camp as well. And I was pretty connected to the basketball world. And so some of my friends in the basketball world, now you're going like, well, we can't expect them to do something back to back weekends. So we got to kind of give us a little bit of distance from the Final Four weekend. And then we also have to make sure that we're not buttoned up too close to the CSCCA clinic, right? So there's a really small window there. And then we also have to check at the university, because we're using university facilities, what events do we have going on as a university? We do like a spring fling carnival. It's the largest student run carnival in the country here. There's numerous sporting events that time of year. So you got to narrow it down and kind of pick a weekend. And then you got to ask for approval to use these facilities that weekend, to be able to pop the doors that weekend, and allow people to get into your facility, to figure out parking for that weekend. So setting the dates is the first thing. Once you have the date set, then you start to go through, okay, so how are we going to do this with speakers? And I think, we're still, this will be the fifth one. We tried to do one, and 2020. That got canceled, obviously, last minute because it was in April. But unless you have a big pool of money like a national organization, you got to kind of figure out, okay, we want to have something really quality. And initially, back when we first started this, we just utilize our staff members and university other people that maybe we have like a leading sleep expert on campus that we had come speak, or maybe your sports psychologist, like just people that would really just kind of want to get their name out there a little bit, maybe, and present, and that wasn't going to cost us a lot financially, right? Um, and so over time, we try to add more and more national level speakers, but then there is a budget, right? You don't have the ability to bring in whoever, Mike Boyle and Al Vermeil and all these different people. So you got to kind of pick and choose. And what I did, after the first couple of years was just with the speaker lineup, calling in some favorites of some colleagues that are pretty well known that would say, hey man, I would love to do that for you. Just make sure it doesn't cost me anything, right? Like just put me up, get me out there. And then I also wanted to use it as well for continued development of current staff. Like you should present at something, right? We all go through that. It's not a lot of fun developing a presentation that a lot of people are going to question or talk about in a negative way when it's over or agree with. And you also want to put your best foot forward, but then everybody's kind of hesitant to really put something out there that they think sets them apart from everybody else, right?
Yeah.
It's this fine line of all that. So once then you start, like I said, you get the dates and you start calling around and figuring out with your staff, okay, what do you think about this person? What are some topics that you guys want to learn about? This is, we have 13 staff members here. I want them all to be excited about who we're bringing in too. And maybe there's a certain topic that we're all trying to learn more about, whether it's, I don't know, load management or whatever that, okay, so we'll kind of tailor one of the speakers to that. And then once you get a pool of people, you got to just start reaching out. And you have to be really proactive. Like I said, I knew that this is early in the fall. We start getting our speaker list together, and you got to start contacting people because anybody that's good is going to be busy, right? And you got to give them as much advance notice as you can. And also, once you get into like late in the fall, then it's holidays, everyone's crazy. And then by the time the holidays calm down and you start the semester, if you're reaching out to people then, it's already too late, right? Everybody's already kind of had their plans for the spring. So you get your speakers, you get them invited. You usually have a couple of different options. Even, you're going to probably have at least one or two more speakers that you're actually planning on having, just knowing that some of those might not pan out for one reason or another. And then you got to figure out, well, how are you getting the messaging across to these speakers, right? Like, how are you getting the message out there to community? Who is your target audience? Initially, when we started doing this camp, we just did so many blanket emails to all the high schools in the area, all the strength staffs in a 4-state radius, let's say. Social media as much as you can, but then it's like, well, how many people are really following the Iron Cats account or my own personal account, right? But you just try to get the messaging out there, and it just takes years of doing it to build momentum. That's the biggest thing that we found. So then once you get your speakers lined up, you get the dates lined up, then it's like, okay, well, what does this look like financially? And then you start reaching out to people that you purchased equipment from, or that you would be interested in sponsoring, and then you're giving them a half hour or 45 minutes of the presentation. You always you come up with a plan, right? A lot of them will say like, okay, that sounds good, but what is your packages? Like, what does that look like? And because anybody that's doing this at a high level already has that all thought of, and you go, oh, I didn't even think of that, right? Anybody at a high level says, okay, for $1,000, I'm just throwing a number out there, you get a 45-minute presentation, and you get to bring 50 handouts, and we'll hand those out to all the attendees, right? For $2,000, you get maybe 2-hour presentation and whatever. And so just working through the sponsors, and we've had some sponsors that are just okay with a smaller donation, and they're just going to give you some flyers and make sure you mention them, and make sure kind of like they do at a lot of clinics. And other people will say, hey, we're not only we'll sponsor a speaker, we're going to have whoever that works for our company who's a well-known name come out and do a presentation. So that then you kind of go, okay, cool, that kills a couple different birds with one stone. uh, so that's the way to get that done. Then once you get your speakers lined up and you start to get your sponsors lined up, and all this takes a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth, figuring things out. And then you start to like figure out like, okay, well, if people are going to come, how do I accept payment? Right? How do I set this payment up? So at the time, initially for my first 3 clinics, I already had purchased a URL and purchased a system to accept payment for my summer camps, right? And so I piggybacked off that and made a web page in conjunction with that URL that also receive payments. But then they're also taking what? A cut of those payments, right? Like one of the hardest things to figure out is how do you accept payments across the country? And there's not a lot of ways to do it, and everybody's taking a cut when you do it like that, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's taking a cut. The QuickBooks is taking a cut. The company that's accepting the payments taking a cut. So then you really have to start to think about, okay, well, now we have the speakers, we have a way to take payment, we have the presentations out. How are we organizing this? What is the itinerary? Right? When do we want people to start? You don't want to do it too early necessarily. You don't want to do it too late in the day either. You have to allow people to get in and out of town. Do you do a 2-day? Do you do a 3-day? How long do you want it to be? Do you have the ability to do, is it just going to be sitting down and looking at PowerPoints all day, or is there going to be an interactive component? Or is there going to be a combination of both? So getting that itinerary, and then once you get the itinerary set up, now you start reaching out to CEU organizations and having them go over it and submitting more money to them to get it accredited, and going through that back and forth process so that people can get accredited CEUs for attending this. And kind of all of this continues to progress and need weekly attention from the moment you get the date set and your speaker set until the day of the camp. And then, as you probably know, nobody registers until like the day before, or 2 days before. So you have a lot of people that are saying, oh, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there through email or text or whatever, but you don't have any money there, right? So you're going to have some money on the front end to pay for flights, to pay for all these CEU requests, to rent a facility. Even though I'm doing this at my own university, we have a policy where there's a facility rental free that any outside company, and this is that's another step, right? Like you are going to probably have to have an LLC or another company or a company to set up to deal with all the 1099 forms you're going to have to send out to your speakers if you're paying them over that $600 amount, to manage all the finances of this, to be on the up and up with my own university, because they're only going to rent that to a company. They're not going to rent it to me individually. There's state issues and tax issues with all that too. So you got to have that figured out before you even start all of this. And so all that kind of stuff is just continuing to morph and progress. And then, maybe some of your sponsors change their amounts or change what they're doing, and then speakers pull out last minute, or you're making adjustments here and there. So all that stuff is something you're going to have to put some time in every week. And I know, even talking, because I've spoke at some high school clinics and some pretty high level high school clinics in Texas, and even for the Rocky Mountain High School Strength, and it's those guys, by the time the guys that are hosting these things, by the time it's done, they are pretty exhausted, man, because now you also have to figure out, okay, so now I'm getting these speakers in town. I got to figure out where they stay, right? Maybe it's your buddy or whatever can stay at your house. But most of these guys, you're trying to do right by them. You're trying to get them a hotel room. You're trying to figure out now, coordinate. All right, well, how am I getting them from the hotel to the conference? how am I getting the food to the conference? So just figuring out a lot of these logistical things.
Man, I got a good follow-up question for you, Coach, but I'm gonna go to Alex here next. So it's fall. Coach Jim walks in and says, "All right, we got our annual seminar coming up. Let's start thinking about some speakers." How much are you trying to really push the envelope of like, let's get outside the box here. Let's break off the traditional person. Let's get like someone we're not even thinking about that I've been diving into, really trying to lean in on this from you and the staff to Coach Jim to say like, let's really try to push the envelope here. Or is there an element of on your end like, actually I still got a lot to learn. I really want to learn from these time tested, proven methods. Like, are we getting weird with it, or are we getting like pretty standard? Like, we need to focus on the basics here. Like, what are you getting on a hill for you for in your end?
Yeah. So first things first, like when we've had our initial meeting as a staff about this, it was just kind of really just throwing names out there, just people that you follow, people that are putting out interesting information. Um, and I know in the past, this is my first time helping organize the clinic because this is our first one in a couple of years, and I got here not too long ago. One thing that I know has been said that has evolved is the fact that we want to move a little further away from the X's and O's because there's so many of those presentations of people, flexing their knowledge muscles of like, how smart they are and how scientific they can get, and really providing some practical information. And so, like I said, in that first meeting, we're talking about, who are some people that you follow? Who do you find interesting? What are you learning about right now that you find really interesting, and who's providing that information? And so we just started throwing some names out there. I'd thrown your name out there because I had followed your stuff for quite some time. And it's really just kind of connections too, like Jim had said, as far as getting people that that have good information to provide or that you're really interested in. So, like for instance, for you, like I interned when I was at Florida. One of the guys that was there, Ryan Hornstra, we used to work for you years back, and so he had first got me onto your stuff, and then I saw that you were putting out Strength Deficit and your PH podcast, and in that sense, I was like, man, this stuff's great. Like, let's try to get him out there. And I think also regarding, like you said, trying to push the envelope a little bit, not always getting the same people that speak at the same conferences every single year and provide the same exact information. So trying to find some unique stuff from some unique people, and then just reaching out to them, seeing what if they would be able to do it, if they're willing to do it, and then just at that point, just kind of the ball gets rolling, and then they show up.
Yeah, because it's a fine line, right? I mean, Coach Jim, this is a product. You're trying to sell something that's interesting and compelling, but you want to be self-serving as well, where you have this, hey, I need to get people in from the outside and be attractive to vendors and be attractive to everyone, so we're not eating a bunch of money on this. But hey, if I can kill two birds with one stone and getting my staff really psyched up and fired up because all the work that's going to go into it, everything you just mentioned, it's got to have some bigger payoff than just money, where your staff walks away and they're immediately better. Like, thank God we do that. We have to keep doing that because that makes our staff hungrier and better. But I would come back and say, and this was the question I have for you, Coach Jim, on this like idea of, at what point, and you can answer this however you like, is it too much? Is it like it's not worth it anymore? It's not fun. It's not interesting. It's like just a lot of work. A lot. I got to get LLC. I got to collect payment. I'm basically just this concierge event planner that I never really wanted to be. Is there a point where you go, I'm throwing my hands up. I'm tired of doing this.
I think that if I didn't have the support and the help of people like Alex, so I kind of just put some of the work on the staff too. I don't try to do all of it myself. And I think if you try to do all of it yourself, like I mentioned earlier, some people that do it, like they might be doing it at their high school where they're the only strength coach. So they're the only ones doing this, right? Like, and then Rob Harris, who's going to be one of the presenters, like he was really my right hand man for the first 3 or 4 years of this, and put a lot of time into this himself, and really helped me out with this, and was able to figure out how to get the CEUs right. I didn't know how to do it. He didn't know how to do it. You have to go through this process. So yeah, you got to, if you're doing it all yourself, I think it could become overwhelming really quickly. And I also think, for me, one of the things that keeps me going is that I love the fact that a lot of former staff members come back to
Oh
this
yeah.
and they want to come back to U of A and to Tucson and still, we all have a little bit in our hearts of every place that we worked, right? And especially, hopefully, they have good experience here. And so they want to come back, and it's a great way to connect with, I think if it got to the point where it's just me doing it all and I wasn't having former staff members and friends, really friends and colleagues that I really respected coming back, then I would be like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore,
Mm.
man. Like this is just too much work, and I'm not getting, like I said, the not only the stimulation in methodology and whatever wise, but also this the the friendship, right? We're all so damn busy with our job, much less family and kids and everything else that you try to stay connected with people, but it's really hard. So this is one time a year that we can really all connect in a professional way, um, but also a way that's like I said, it's intimate. So I think if I lost that part of it, then it would be like, yeah, I'm going to just move on.
Yeah. There's this like dynamic when you put on a seminar that I always think about that you're not tracking, right? You're like, okay, self-serving. I get really good speakers in here that I would go pay to see myself. Just required a little bit of hustle and elbow grease and just keep pushing to get some folks in here that I don't have to travel to see them or I don't have to pay for their course. Great, awesome. Or I kind of get my staff, seeing someone out there and speak. But then it goes in the other level of your athletes notice this and you go, wow, like you're speaking at a conference this weekend. Like, yeah, by the way, I'm a big deal. Like, I'm one of the best in the world to do this. Like if you didn't realize that already, and they have a little bit more of this, and your coaches do that too. Of like the coaches you work with, like, they're not taking you for granted. Just the frequency in which they're seeing you and the working dynamic of get your coffee morning. Hey, got to go coach my athletes. Like, and then all of a sudden you get a couple hundred people showing up annually to hear you speak, and you're like, they have a whole different perception of you, right? And then this other big thing of like, this like hustle mentality of, hey, if I really commit myself, I could put on a pretty elaborate and dynamic event that people really like, that we get great feedback that represents not only myself and our staff, but this university. And everybody collectively looks at this. But I guess it always goes to that point of like, at what point do you really evaluate that relatively speaking to the cost or the opportunity cost that goes into it? And I see this quite a bit, and I feel like I've experienced what you guys are experiencing of like just a headache of like, oh man, not many people have signed up. We got a lot of money out. There's a lot of stuff that we still have to do. Oh, by the way, then when they're here, like just the concierge, like consigliere role, like you're playing as soon as that person lands to when they have to leave, like shoot, don't forget Tim's got to get his flight out here after this. Make sure Alex, you're driving him as soon as this. Like all these things going on, and like that process is emotionally draining. And then you got to come back to work on Monday, and you got to go. By the way, athletes, what I did over the weekend doesn't matter. I still got to bring a great service to you, or the stuff that you're sacrificing on that Thursday and Friday before it. But all the while, like I think this is like a really cool testament to that, like never rest on your laurels, push yourself. I find a lot of strength coaches are getting more entrepreneurial, and I look at this example as a really cool thing that we kind of look at you two guys as like figuring it out, right? Like I had no idea how to get an LLC, and I was aware that existed, right? But I open up a business, and now like that's something that's really on top of mine, and I know I have to know what a partnership or an LLC is, and I had no education on that whatsoever. And you're kind of getting a first rate education of that. Like, oh, do I do Stripe? Do I do this different uh, payment processing thing? How do I collect money from the taxes, from the actual credit card fees, all these things? And then where does that money go, by the way? Like, do we create a separate bank account? Like, what do we do on that? And how do we get QuickBooks and accounting on this? And oh, there's accountant fees, all this stuff that you're just not tracking. And you got a first rate education. And I don't know, maybe, I mean, you've worked in the private sector too, right, Jim?
No, I just yeah, I've had my own LLC now for I don't know 10 years. I've always hustled in the private sector for dabbled in it, but yeah, never like my own shop per se.
But if I correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine you would have a much better jump off to opening up a business if I ever had to than I would based off of that experience. Would you say
Oh
that's
yeah, yeah, you're already 100%. 100%. You understand a lot of these business things that as a strength coach, you're never taught all that stuff, right? And really most people aren't. If you've never been a business owner, you don't have any idea about how people just think, oh, you're your own business owner, you make your own hours, and it's no, there's a lot to it for sure.
Mm. And two, now, like, I mean, just look at it from the personal standpoint of when you go meet, like, you're an associate AD now. So when you go meet with ADs that are, it's all about bottom line and what value you're bringing, and like, can we replace you at a cheaper cost? Like, you have a little bit more of a savvy and a sense about what that actually feels like, and when they're like weighing you and sizing you up, or is this worth the cost here for Jim and his entire staff and the weight room and all the things that have that? You're like, I can talk money. I know this a little bit better, a little bit more intimate. Like I would have much better platform integrating myself back in the athletic department and be able to communicate to higher ups based off the knowledge I have on PNLs and everything else I do. And I kind of kick myself now looking back of like I never had that, like, I guess that motivation or incentive to just have a seminar or conference and put myself in that position of having to really grind and figure that out. Um, Alex, do you feel like, hey, look, I'm just kind of going through Coach Jim's checklist and, I'm just trying to work through this? Or do you have any kind of sense of like the bigger picture of that just at this point in your career?
I think I'm definitely under his guidance. There's no doubt about that because this is my first time helping organize anything like this. So it's not really like you said, I have any prior knowledge, but I wouldn't frame it as like I'm going through his checklist because this is honestly something that I'm really passionate about. I know how much I enjoyed coming out here as an intern and meeting everybody and learning from all the speakers, and how much value that brought to me. So it was really something that like we had like joked around, or I kind of like, I mean, I know Jim wanted to get it done, but like I was really hoping for like, man, like, it's not 2020 anymore. Like, let's get this thing rolling again. Like, I was really excited about it. We were always asking, and we have like a couple side group chats between me and Jim and all the other coaches that we're friendly with, and it's like, man, like, is Ironcats happening this year? And so there was really some good steam behind it in the sense of like, it's a really great experience. So by in some senses, yes, like going through the checklist of like, okay, we need to get X, Y, and Z done. But it really doesn't seem like too much work to me because I'm so pumped up about like, man, let's get everybody in town. Like, let's have a great time. Let's learn a lot of stuff. And, you're really excited to get it going.
Sweet. Jim, I got one more question for you. When you're
Sure.
done on this seminar, let's say that night or the following morning, how are you judging based off of the other ones you've done a good or bad seminar?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, well, first thing that comes to mind is just the speakers, right? Because sometimes we've all had this experience, right, where you bring in a really high level, what you think is going to be a great speaker, and it ends up not being as great as you thought for whatever reason. There's a multitude of reasons that could be. So I think the presentations, I think also like the feedback, you're going to get really good feedback from everybody, ideally that night, when everybody goes out after the conference, hey, but I think, just the interaction between everybody is what a big part of that too, right? And I think, I judge it off of, 2 months later down the road when somebody, like, we've had this happen several times now where people have got jobs with other people that they didn't even know they met at the conference, or people stay connected at the conference that they didn't know prior to the conference, um, or people stay connected and implement something they learned at the conference and say like, hey man, I love this presentation at the conference, I implemented it, I stayed in contact with Tim, and I'm actually taking some of the concepts even further that I learned at the conference.
Hmm.
That's how I'm judging it. For like a couple months down the road, there's like that initial judgment, like I mentioned. How are the speakers? How was the interaction? What was the feedback? And then 2 to 3, 4 months down the road, and really even 5 months down the road, when people start asking me in late summer, like, okay, what's the date for Iron Cats next year?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I knew that must have went over pretty well the year before.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right. Just any closing thoughts on putting on a seminar? Let's say there's a strength coach out there working at another college or a high school strength coach, and they're saying, you know what, I really kind of want to cross that threshold. What's the one thing between the two of you guys that you think would be like, start here? This would be the perfect place to start. Like, set the date, whatever it is you guys feel is right. Just so they kind of have something tangible to walk away from and kind of start that process themselves.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
I'll, I'll start. I'll just say, be strategic about the time of year you're going to do it. be aware of what other things are going on, especially at a national level that you don't want to compete against when you're doing it. And just realize too that like it takes time. Like your first one, you really don't figure it out till like three or four. The first one is really kind of a test. Just manage expectations with yourself and just know that it's going to take some time to really build momentum for these things.
Mm. Alex?
I would say just kind of gauge interest and see, what that's going to look like to kind of see, how many people are going to be able to get out there. What is your budget going to look like? How many speakers are you going to be able to get out there? And really what you want it to form, like how you want to format it. What's going to be your target audience? What kind of speakers are you going to bring in? And, what's going to be that overarching message of the conference of, what you want people walking away with.
Man, that's awesome, man. All right, so honestly, this was really cool. I'm gonna get this podcast out there for everyone listening. We have April 22nd at the University of Arizona. We have a tremendous list of speakers. So we got Andy Gillum, Coach Jim Krumpos, myself, Jason Hamera, Rob Harris, and then Alex all talking here. So obviously, you got two of the triumvirate right here talking through, and then we're going to get a great host of speakers. I'm fired up about this event just in general, and one of the things whenever you get the opportunity to speak, you're thinking, wow, I also got an opportunity to attend a really high level seminar as well, which is kind of cool, right? Like I get the price of admission from hopefully bringing some value to and getting to learn from that as well. So, that's the fun part when you hopefully make up to a certain level where you think people are of interest to you. It's like, the rich get richer. I get a bunch of really good information. I can learn a little bit and I get the opportunity to speak myself. So it's really cool. I'm excited about this event. I'm going to have the link to sign up on that. I have it on my website as well. So we'll have all that in our notes. Again, I highly recommend getting out there. This is in person only, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. You got to be there, guys. You got to feel it. You got to touch it. You got to smell it, man. It's life's out there, man. You can't do this through a computer. My goodness. Awesome. Well, fellas, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate your insight. Hopefully there's someone out there that's going, yeah, I know I got my work ahead of me, but this would definitely be a worthwhile venture. So appreciate you guys sharing and being transparent on the whole experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.